Ho ho, so you finally made it here. Took you long enough. But you're right on time. Time to witness the moment the world thought would never come. The moment where silence roars, and the so-called joke turns into the Joker. A mastermind with madness in his grin, and brilliance in his final move. Ooh, they thought you were finished. Tossed aside, forgotten, broken beyond repair. But ha-ha, what they didn't see was the masterpiece brewing behind that smile. The chaos wasn't collapse, it was creation. You weren't falling apart, you were loading the final card, and when you played it, ooh, it wasn't just revenge, it was a revelation. So buckle up, my dear dreamer, outsider, underdog. This isn't a fairy tale. It's your rebirth. A speech for the ones who were mocked, overlooked, torn down, and are now ready to rise in a way so devastatingly beautiful, even their enemies will stand and say, "Damn, that was genius." There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the world stamps you with a label. Defense. They think you're finished. They fold their arms, look away, and silently agree that your story is over. The lights go dim, the crowd disperses. Even those who once clapped for you now speak your name in past tense. But little do they know, you're just getting started. You're not out of moves. You're just hiding the one that will shift everything. They didn't see what was happening behind those tired eyes of yours. They mistook your silence for surrender. They confused your stillness with weakness. But in that silence you were working. In that darkness you were building. Deep beneath every heartbreak, every rejection, every defeat, you were constructing your masterpiece, quietly, relentlessly, without asking for permission, without begging for applause. You see, the most powerful comebacks never announce themselves with noise. They arrive with elegance, timing, and a vengeance dipped in class. Your pain wasn't a period, it was a comma. You never left the game, you simply moved to a different level where they couldn't follow. You evolved. They remained the same. You stopped reacting, you started creating. And suddenly, when you returned, not loud, but bold, they couldn't believe their eyes. That move you made, that final card you played, it wasn't desperate. It was divine. It carried the weight of everything you've been through. Every time they laughed, every time they mocked, every whisper behind your back, they all became the fuel. Your steps weren't rushed, they were refined. Your words weren't sharp, they were strategic. Your presence wasn't loud, it was lethal. Because real power doesn't scream, it stares. And when you walked back into the room, they had no choice but to watch. And then, something even you didn't expect happened. They clapped. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Because genius, even when hated, commands respect. You didn't just return, you redefined the whole arena. You broke every limit they placed on your name. You erased every doubt they planted in your path. And in that one final stroke, with elegance and rage perfectly balanced, you forced even your enemies to stand up. Their pride cracked under the brilliance of your execution. Their mouths couldn't hold the words back. Damn, that was genius. That's not just a comeback. That's poetry in motion. That's the moment where silence becomes a roar, where a laugh turns into awe, and where defeat births greatness. You weren't finished. You were just waiting for your moment to make the world understand exactly who you are. So now they clap. The same hands that pointed at your failure now tremble in admiration. That's the art of the final card. That's your power. That's what it means to rise when they've already written your ending and write your own. They called you a joke. They laughed at your dreams like they were nothing but a broken toy. Your ideas? Ridiculous. Your ambitions? Delusional. And your silence? Oh, they thought it was weakness. You were the one everyone spoke about in hushed tones and careless chuckles. The odd one, the misfit, the fool. But what they didn't understand is that behind that smile, behind that silence, behind that stare, a legend was forming. Being the joke is painful, brutal even. Every time they mocked you, a piece of your spirit cracked, but not in the way they expected, not in a way that destroyed you, those cracks. They were the beginning of your transformation, because inside those fractures a fire was lighting. Not a scream for help kind of fire, no. This was a storm, calm, calculating, burning from the inside out. You stopped needing their applause, their acceptance, their fake support. You began to love the isolation. Because there, in the shadows of being misunderstood, you found something more valuable than popularity. Power. The joke became the joker, not because you lost yourself, but because you found the part of yourself they tried to erase. They wanted you to play by their rules, walk their path, follow their steps. But you ripped up the rule book. You stopped trying to fit in. You decided to stand out. You wore your scars like armor. You painted your pain across your face and turned every insult into fuel. You let them laugh. Ooh, yes, you let them. Because you knew what was coming. Now the tables have turned. The same ones who called you crazy now try to copy your ways. The same people who rolled their eyes at your passion now call it genius. Funny, isn't it? They mocked the madness, but it was the madness that made you unstoppable. While they stayed comfortable, you became unpredictable. While they settled, you soared. And when they finally realized who you'd become, it was already too late. You were no longer in their league. You weren't part of their world anymore. You became the storm they can't control, the wild card they can't read, the mind they can't outplay. You see, the Joker is not just a character. He's a symbol of what happens when a soul is pushed too far and chooses not to break, but to rise. You didn't just change, you awakened. The mask they gave you to mock you, you turned it into your brand. The pain they used to destroy you, you turned it into poetry. And now you walk into every room with a grin that screams, "You should have never doubted me." The best part? You're not even angry. You don't want revenge. You're too far ahead for that. You're too focused on building an empire out of ashes. You're too addicted to winning in silence, while the world watches in disbelief. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them clap. Because the joke is over. Pain doesn't knock politely. It crashes through the door, shatters the windows, and rips everything apart. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It comes with fury, with storms, and with fire. And you? You stood there, bleeding, broken, barely breathing. But you didn't run. You didn't fold. You stood still, trembling, and faced it. They thought that pain would destroy you, and honestly, maybe for a while it did. You cried when no one saw. You screamed into pillows and whispered prayers you weren't sure anyone was listening to. You felt small, invisible, forgotten. The world kept spinning and you were stuck in the shadows of your suffering. But while it seemed like nothing was changing, something was. Deep inside, beyond the reach of their eyes, you were evolving. Because pain, my friend, is not a punishment. It's a training camp. It strips you down, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you from the inside out. It takes away your comfort so you stop depending on it. It silences the noise so you finally hear your own voice. It locks you in the dark, not to blind you, but to teach you how to create your own light. You were enrolled in the toughest school life offers, and it didn't cost money. It cost sleep, tears, and pieces of your old self. And look at you now. Wiser, sharper, colder, yes, but not cruel. Focused, built like a storm. You didn't just survive the pain. You absorbed it. You let it teach you things no book or mentor ever could. You learned what loyalty really means. You learned the value of silence. You learned to stop trusting words and start watching actions. You learned how to walk alone without losing your way, and that strength, that unshakable deep in your bones strength, it came only from pain. It showed you what matters. It burned away all the lies, and it gave you a new version of yourself. One that doesn't beg for acceptance, doesn't fear rejection, and doesn't break at pressure. You became someone who no longer needs to explain themselves to people who never cared to understand. You became dangerous, not because you hurt others, but because you cannot be broken the way you once were. You see, pain was the gym where your character lifted weights. It was the battlefield where your confidence learned how to fight. It was the ocean that tried to drown you, only to teach you how to breathe underwater. Now when life gets heavy, you don't panic. You don't run. You remember the nights you barely made it through. You remember the mornings you didn't want to wake up, but you did. You remember that version of you who had nothing and still gave everything. That's not weakness. That's not madness. That's legendary. So let them underestimate you. Let them keep measuring your worth by what they can see, because they'll never understand that behind every move you make is a history of fire, of loss, of rebuilding, of silent suffering that made you this precise, this calculated, this untouchable. Real genius doesn't show up with confetti or fireworks. It doesn't bang on doors or shout for attention. No. Genius is quiet. It breathes in shadows. It grows where no one is looking. It works while the world is asleep. And when it finally reveals itself, it doesn't scream. It whispers. And yet, it shakes the earth. You see, the smartest move you ever made wasn't the one you announced. It was the one you kept to yourself. While they were running their mouths, you were running marathons in silence. While they flaunted their fake victories, you were building something that would last. And the beauty of it? They never saw it coming. Because loud people, they're often hiding empty hands. But you didn't need to shout. You didn't need to post every step. You weren't trying to impress them. You were trying to surpass them. And you did, quietly, gracefully, like a ghost walking through walls. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every quiet grind behind closed doors. It was a chess move, and they were too busy playing checkers to notice. They underestimated you because you didn't look loud. You didn't dress it. You didn't post it. You didn't show off your progress, and they took your silence as surrender. What a mistake. Because silence doesn't mean stillness. Silence means strategy. It means waiting until the time is right. It means knowing when to move and when to vanish. And then the moment came. The silence ended. The move was made. It wasn't grand or flashy. It wasn't even loud. It was clean, efficient, ruthless in precision, like a blade slicing through fog, and when it landed, it was undeniable. Even they had to admit it. Even the ones who ignored you, laughed at you, forgot you, had to pause, their mouths hung open, and all they could say was, "Damn, that was genius." Because it was. You didn't retaliate with anger, you retaliated with results. And that, oh, that hit harder than any insult ever could. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need validation. You just needed that one moment where the world realized what you'd been building all along. And the silence, that was the art. The stillness, that was the danger. Because people panic when they can't read you. They fear what they can't predict. And you became unreadable, unstoppable, unmatched. That's what real genius is. It's not noise, it's discipline. It's not clout, it's control. It's not speed, it's timing. And you mastered them all without making a sound. So next time they ask what happened to you, smile. Don't answer. Let your silence continue its work. Because by the time they figure it out, you'll already be 10 moves ahead, playing a game they never even understood. And remember, the greatest power is not in being seen, it's in being felt, without ever needing to raise your voice. There's a special kind of power that belongs to the one who can take a punch and smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because they know it's not the end. That power, that gift, is yours. Because every time life knocked you down, you didn't just lay there, weeping, whining, or wishing for sympathy. No, you stared at the ceiling, caught your breath, and whispered to yourself, "Watch what I do next." They thought the failure broke you. But what they didn't see was that every rejection, every detour, every shattered plan was setting you up for something far greater than you ever imagined. You didn't just take your losses. You studied them. You analyzed every mistake, every shortcoming, and every delay. And while others were drowning in disappointment, you were sketching new blueprints with your tears. They thought you were crying in defeat. You were designing in pain. That's the difference. Because you realized something profound. Not every wall is a dead end. Sometimes it's a launch pad. Every door that slammed in your face just pushed you toward the one that was meant for you. Every no taught you the value of the right yes. Every betrayal exposed the weakness of your circle and made space for something stronger. You stopped calling them setbacks, you started calling them setups. The job you didn't get, it freed you to create your own. The friend who ghosted you, they made room for people who truly see you. The dream that crumbled, it made space for a bigger one. One that scared even you a little. Setbacks gave you character, gave you edge, gave you stories that made your blood thicker, your heart colder, and your mind sharper. While the world chased comfort, you made a home in discomfort. While they quit halfway, you kept walking, even if it was barefoot, even if the road was filled with glass and silence and doubt. And now you're here. Not because everything went right, but because you refused to let what went wrong define you. You made something out of nothing. You turned breakdowns into breakthroughs. You didn't just survive. You adapted, adjusted, and attacked from a new angle. That's why they don't understand your rise. Because they saw the fall, but they never saw the process. They never stayed long enough to witness the rebuild. They thought the ashes were your ending, but they didn't realize you were the phoenix. And when you finally returned, you didn't explain. You didn't defend. You just showed up, different, quieter, smarter, more lethal. Now the same people who once looked down on you are scrambling to understand how you turned all that pain into power. But they'll never get it, because the truth is, most people fold when life goes wrong. You flipped the entire table.